Hey guys, welcome to Play This Not That, and in today's episode we have underwater cities facing off against Terraforming Mars. Now, I'm Alex from Board Game Co., and in Play This Not That, I pick two board games, and I tell you which one I think you should be playing more than the other one. This does not mean that the loser is a bad game, not by any means. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It just means that I think one of these games is more worth having in your collection and more worth playing. If you stick around to the end of this video, I will tell you whether the loser of this episode is actually still in my collection or not, because sometimes I own both and sometimes I don't. Depends on the game. In today's episode, we have Underwater Cities, a game by Vladimir Suchi, hope I'm pronouncing that right, and this is an engine building game. Honestly, both of these games, and this is why we're comparing them because they have similarities, both of these games are engine building games with a ton of cards that continuously play out. You build your engine, you add more cards, and you keep doing more and more things and becoming more and more powerful throughout the game. Underwater Cities is a bit more structured. There's three basically cycles to the game, and at the end of each cycle of a few rounds there's a production round, and throughout this whole experience you're building up your engine, you're building up your tableau, you're building up your underwater city, so that each production round you are able to do slightly more than you were able to do before, and you're just constantly towards the end of these various rounds you'll start to feel drained of resources, but at the end of each production round you'll rake it all in, you'll head into the next production round and continue to do more and better. In Terraforming Mars, there's less of a production round going on, but you are drafting cards round to round, and then you're building up your Terraforming Mars, as the name might sound. Honestly, both of these names are pretty good for their games. They cover the theme perfectly. But you terraform Mars, and you slowly get the oxygen levels and the water and the temperature, and you terraform Mars throughout the game. But doing that whole process, you're constantly drafting cards, adding to your tableau, becoming more and more powerful through the use of cards, just like Underwater Cities, until the end of the game when a winner is declared. Now, both of these games have a lot of similarities. They are often compared to one another, but the main similarities really come down to both of them are giant engine building tableau games with a ton of card play and card interplay and mechanisms that provide a very richly rewarding experience as you continue to play. Both of them, you read the rule book, you're kind of like, is that it? Is that really what all the hype is about? But then you play the game and you're like, oh, I see what the hype is about. I see why it's so satisfying to take these cards that were fairly, boring when I looked at the rule book, but the way they all interplay and the way you sit there and you build up your engine and I have these three cards and I add this card and I add that card, and now suddenly I'm doing this, that, and everything else. And both of them are very rewarding experiences. For me, the Play This Not That is going to go to Terraforming Mars. Play Terraforming Mars, not Underwater Cities. Terraforming Mars edges it out for me because of a few reasons, which I'll get into now. To begin with, it has card drafting. I love card drafting. I find it to be such a richly rewarding, tense mechanic. Now, Underwater Cities does a great job with its hand management. You're constantly adding cards to your hand. At the end of every turn, you have to discard down to 3 cards, limiting your choices and limiting your strategic potential. It is very well done for a game that does not have drafting. Now, drafting is my own personal bias to an extent. I love drafting. I find drafting more tense, more interesting, more not thematic, but just tougher. I love drafting. It's worth noting, by the way, that Terraforming Mars is not required drafting, but it is the way I recommend playing it every single time. Otherwise, Underwater Cities might even win, actually. But so drafting is one reason why Terraforming Mars is going to win out. In the beauty category, or the thematic, the components, Underwater Cities does win pretty handily there. Terraforming Mars looks like it has clip art left, right, and center. The components are terrible. Underwater Cities is not amazing, but it has slightly better components and slightly better art. It definitely does win in the component category, but I prefer the gameplay of Terraforming Mars, so it's still going to win despite that. Other aspects, Terraforming Mars, one of the things I really like about Terraforming Mars compared to Underwater Cities is Terraforming Mars does not have a fixed endgame. It doesn't have a limited number of rounds that you're done with. Rather, it has, once you're done Terraforming Mars, the game will end at the end of the round, and all the players will end then. I drastically prefer that, because when I'm playing a game that's an engine builder with a fixed number of rounds, when I'm getting down to those final rounds, it's just everything becomes so number crunchy. Everything becomes, oh, I have 2 rounds left. If I do this, it's going to cost me 3 resources and get me 5 back. But if I do this, it's going to, save me 4 resources, but maybe I can get 1 back if I do things here. When you have an exact fixed number of rounds in a game, it is just so much easier to get into this brain-burning spiral of trying to optimize out every single action. I don't like that as much as I like when you don't know exactly when the game will end. Terraforming Mars is so much more tense and less number crunchy when the game can end in 2 rounds, 3 rounds, or even next round. When you don't know what's going to happen, it makes those decisions more tense and more from the gut as opposed to from the number crunching analysis paralysis thinking through every last move. So that's another reason why I prefer Terraforming Mars. And then the third reason I guess I prefer Terraforming Mars is it doesn't feel as on rails. While both games are richly strategic, both games have a lot of choices. In Underwater Cities, the gameplay does feel a bit more on rails. It does feel a bit more like every single game is going to play out along the same kind of guided structure. Yes, there's divergent paths. Yes, there's a little bit of variability, but ultimately it does feel like the game kind of follows the strict path. In Terraforming Mars, it does not feel that way at all. You could sit there and be colonizing Mars radically differently game to game. Your strategy of, do I want to go for points from cards? Do I want to, build up my cities on Mars? Every single game has felt so different compared to Underwater Cities and what's actually happening. Again, don't get me wrong, they are both very, very well done. They both have a lot of rich thematic choice going on here, but I prefer the less on rails feel of Terraforming Mars. That's really it. That's why I prefer Terraforming Mars in terms of which game I would pick if I had to pick one. In this case, honestly, Underwater Cities sadly is not staying in my collection. While they are both great games, and while I will never turn down a game of Underwater Cities, if I am by your house, if you want to play Underwater Cities, I will happily play it. I did enjoy it a lot, but I can never see myself picking it over Terraforming Mars. The gap is just too big for me in terms of my preference for these games. Again, both great games. I cannot say that any differently. They are amazing games. They are thoroughly engaging. They are rewarding experiences. But in today's episode of Play This Not That, play Terraforming Mars, not Underwater Cities. That being said, Underwater Cities is still worth giving it a shot. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you agree, if you disagree, let me know. Have you played both these games? Have you played only one of them? Do you want to play the other? Let me know your thoughts down below. I'm always interested what other people's experiences are. On Board Game Geek, Terraforming Mars does rate higher, so it clearly has that more universal appeal. Then again, I am interested in your reasons why you prefer one over the other. This episode is brought to you by Board Game Co. Go ahead and click the subscribe link down below. Right once when you click that, there'll be a little bell next to it. Go ahead and click the bell so you get notified when we produce a new video. If you like this video, if you like our other videos, let us know down below which type of content you like, which type of content not so interesting to you, and what we can do to improve this experience for you. Once again, Alex from Board Game Co. Subscribe, bell, like, watch another video, and I can't wait to hear from you.